I don't know if it was courage or foolishness that pushed me forward that night. Maybe both. All I knew was that everyone around me had said the same thing: stay away from her. But the truth was, I had already crossed that line in my mind long before I ever stood at her door. Her name was Clara. 46. The kind of woman who carried silence like a second skin. I'd seen her dozens of times before, at the bookstore, the cafe, once leaning against the railing outside her apartment as though the night air was the only thing keeping her steady. Every time, I found myself staring a little too long. And every time, she never seemed to notice. Or maybe she just pretended not to. That evening, the street was quiet enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the ground was still dry. I hesitated on the steps, shifting the paper bag in my hands, a bottle of wine I wasn't even sure she liked. My fingers felt clumsy, and I almost turned back. But then her light flickered on through the window, casting a warm glow across the curtains, and something in me refused to leave. When she opened the door, I almost forgot how to speak. Clara wore a simple cardigan, sleeves pushed back at the elbows, as though she'd been working or maybe reading. Her hair, slightly undone, framed her face in a way that made her look both tired and impossibly beautiful. "You came," she said softly. No smile, no surprise. Just those two words, like she'd been expecting me, though neither of us had planned this. I nodded too quickly. "I thought maybe you could use some company." Her eyes lingered on mine a moment too long before she stepped aside to let me in. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. A book was open on the arm of the couch, spine bent like it had been waiting for her return. She gestured toward the kitchen without a word, so I followed. We sat at the small table near the window. The rain had finally started, tapping gently against the glass. I placed the bottle on the table, clearing my throat. "I wasn't sure what you liked." She touched the bottle lightly, then let her hand rest there as if deciding whether to push it away or pull it closer. "Wine is fine," she murmured. There was silence. The kind that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. I found myself studying the curve of her hands, the faint lines around her eyes, the way her lips pressed together, as though she was holding back something she didn't want to say. "You don't have to do this," she said at last. Her voice was quiet, almost drowned by the rain. "Do what?" "Pretend." The word stung, though she hadn't said it unkindly. I shook my head. "I'm not pretending, Clara." Her gaze lifted to mine then, sharp and searching. For a moment neither of us moved. The air felt heavier, like the storm outside had slipped into the room with us. My pulse quickened, but I didn't look away. "I shouldn't let you stay," she whispered. "Then tell me to go," I said. My voice cracked slightly, betraying me. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her eyes, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear with trembling fingers. And just as the silence between us stretched to the breaking point, just as I thought she might finally tell me what she really wanted, there was a sharp knock at the door. Clara froze. And so did I. The knock at the door lingered in the air like an accusation. Clara didn't move right away, just pressed her palm against the table as though steadying herself. I half expected her to send me out the back or pretend I wasn't there. Instead, after a long pause, she exhaled and rose slowly. Through the glass of the peephole, I saw her stiffen. She didn't open it. Whoever was out there eventually gave up, their footsteps fading down the hall. When she returned, she didn't explain. And I didn't ask. The rain outside was heavier now, streaking down the window in uneven lines. She sat back across from me, but her eyes had changed, darker, guarded. "I don't usually let people in," she said finally. I smiled faintly, though my chest tightened. "Then why me?" Her laugh was soft but hollow. "Maybe I wanted to remember what it felt like, before." "Before what?" She hesitated. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "Before the divorce. Before I forgot what it's like to have someone sit across from me without expecting anything." I didn't know what to say. I'd never been married, never even close. At 25, I was still stumbling through jobs, half-finished degrees, and relationships that never lasted long enough to mean something. She, on the other hand, looked like someone who had lived through storms I couldn't even imagine. "I don't expect anything," I said, though the words felt heavier than I intended. Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine with a quiet intensity that made me shift in my seat. "That's what makes this dangerous," she whispered. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I already knew. The age between us wasn't just a number, it was a warning sign. I could hear it in the way she avoided looking too long, in the way her body angled slightly away from me even as her voice softened. Still, I couldn't stop watching her. The way her cardigan slipped slightly off her shoulder. The way her hair fell loose, catching the dim light of the kitchen. I kept telling myself not to think about it. That she was too old for me, too untouchable, too careful. And yet, sitting there, it felt like every second stretched the space between us thinner, closer to breaking. She spoke again quietly. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago. Someone who used to believe in me when I'd already stopped." The words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because I understood what it felt like to want someone to see you when you were convinced no one did. Without thinking, I reached across the table. My fingers brushed against hers, just lightly, enough that either of us could pull away. She didn't. Her hand trembled once, then stilled under mine. Neither of us said a word. But in that silence, something shifted, dangerous, irreversible, and impossible to take back. Her hand was still under mine when the buzz of her phone shattered the stillness. She pulled back quickly, almost spilling her wine, and reached for it. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize, Daniel. She turned the phone face down, but not before I saw the flicker of dread in her eyes. I wanted to ask, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I leaned back, giving her space. The rain outside pressed harder against the window, steady, relentless. "It's just complicated," she murmured. My chest tightened, my thoughts racing. Complicated meant married. Or someone close. Someone who had a claim to her that I didn't. The silence between us turned brittle. She stood abruptly, pacing toward the sink, her arms crossed like a shield. "You're too young for this. Too young for me. If anyone saw..." Her voice broke, and she didn't finish. I followed her slowly, stopping a few feet away. "Then why let me in? Why not just close the door and pretend I never showed up?" She turned then, eyes bright, almost angry. "Because I couldn't. That's the problem." The air throbbed with something sharp and unsaid. For a moment neither of us moved. I watched her jaw tighten, the way her hands gripped the edge of the counter, as though holding on to something invisible. I stepped closer. Too close. My pulse pounded as I caught the faint scent of her perfume mixed with rain-damp air. Her eyes darted to my lips before flicking away. "Don't," she whispered. "I'm not." My voice cracked. I can't stop thinking about you." Her breath hitched, and for a second, I thought she might close the gap. But instead, she pushed past me, heading toward the door. "Go home," she said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't move. My feet felt rooted, like leaving would mean giving up something I hadn't even had yet. "Clara." Before I could finish, the knock came again. Louder this time. She froze. I glanced at the door. The voice outside was muffled but clear enough. "Clara? It's me. Open up." A man's voice. Older. Familiar to her, by the way she went pale. She turned to me, panic flashing across her face. "You need to go. Now." My heart hammered. I looked at the door, then back at her. "Who is it?" "Not now. Please," she hissed, grabbing my arm and steering me toward the hallway. Her grip trembled, but her urgency didn't. I wanted to protest, to demand answers, but her eyes were pleading, desperate. Against every instinct, I let her push me down the narrow corridor. Just before I slipped out the back door, I caught one last look, her hand pressed over her mouth, her shoulders shaking, as though holding in everything she couldn't say aloud. And I knew, without doubt, that whoever was on the other side of that door wasn't just anyone. I didn't sleep that night. Not after slipping out of Clara's back door, not after hearing that man's voice echo in my head. By morning, I'd convinced myself I wouldn't go back. That I shouldn't. But by evening, my feet betrayed me, carrying me up the same rain-dark steps to her door. This time, she opened it slower, like she'd been waiting but didn't want to admit it. Her eyes were tired, ringed with shadows. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice low. "Then tell me to leave." She didn't. Instead, she stepped aside. Inside, the apartment felt heavier than before, like the walls had absorbed last night's tension. Books still cluttered the table, but the wine glasses were gone, as if erasing any trace of me. She moved around the room restlessly, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder, her fingers tugging at the sleeve. "Who was he?" I asked finally. Her head snapped toward me. "Don't. Clara, it doesn't matter." Her voice was sharp, but I heard the tremor underneath. "It matters to me." My words came faster than I could stop them. "I keep thinking about you, even when I try not to. I can't just sit here pretending I don't care who's at your door in the middle of the night." Her hands tightened into fists at her sides. For a moment, I thought she'd tell me everything, but instead she let out a bitter laugh. "You sound like you have a right to be jealous." The word hit me hard, jealous. Maybe I was. Maybe that's what had been gnawing at me since the moment she pushed me out into the rain. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, stepping closer. "But it's not nothing." She turned away, staring out the rain-streaked window. "You're too young to understand what happens when people like me make mistakes. I've already lived through the fallout of loving the wrong person. I can't." Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to the glass as if the storm outside could take her confession. I crossed the room before I could stop myself. "You think I don't understand risk? That I don't know what people will say? I don't care, Clara." She spun then, eyes flashing with something raw, anger, fear, desire all tangled together. "And what if I do?" The words hung between us, sharp and unsteady. I reached for her arm, my fingers brushing her skin. She didn't pull away this time. Her breath itched, her lips parting just slightly. The space between us collapsed, and I could feel the warmth of her body against mine, the storm outside crashing in rhythm with my pulse. "Tell me you don't want this," I whispered. Her eyes locked onto mine, trembling, unblinking. For the first time, she didn't hide, didn't turn away. But before she could answer, the sound of a key slid into the front door lock. The metallic click of the key in the lock froze us both. Clara's breath hitched as her body stiffened against mine. For one wild heartbeat, I thought she might push me away. Instead, she whispered, almost to herself, "Not now." The door swung open. A man stepped inside, tall, gray around the temples, carrying the weary confidence of someone who still believed this was his home. His gaze fell on me instantly, narrowing in suspicion before shifting to Clara. "Who's this?" His voice was calm but edged, like a blade pressed flat against the skin. Clara's lips parted, but nothing came out. She looked caught, like a child found sneaking out past curfew. My stomach sank. I stepped forward before she could speak. "I'm just a friend." The man's eyes lingered on me, then darted back to her. "A friend?" He gave a dry laugh. "Since when do you invite friends over at midnight?" I felt Clara flinch beside me. That was when it hit me, the way she hadn't opened the door last night, the way her hand shook when she'd seen the name Daniel on her phone. He wasn't an ex. He wasn't gone. He was still here, orbiting her life like a storm she couldn't escape. She finally found her voice, thin and trembling. "Daniel, don't. Please." The air seemed to vanish from the room. I looked at her, waiting for her to deny it, to tell me I was wrong. But she didn't. Her silence was the answer. "You're still married," I whispered, more accusation than question. Her eyes darted to mine, wide, pleading. "It's not," she broke off, shaking her head. "It's not what you think." But the words felt hollow. My chest burned as I stepped back, the floor tilting under me. Married. She was married. Every risk, every stolen glance, it wasn't just dangerous. It was betrayal, wrapped in quiet moments and trembling hands. Daniel moved closer, his voice low but cutting. You don't belong here, kid. Go home. I should have left. I should have walked out without another word. But instead, I turned to Clara, unable to keep the ache from my voice. Why didn't you tell me? Her face crumpled in a way I hadn't seen before, not anger, not indifference, but something raw, like shame clawing its way out. Because I wanted to feel alive again, she whispered. The confession lodged itself in my chest like glass. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't pushing me away. She was admitting she'd used me, not fully, not cruelly, but enough. Daniel shook his head, disgust clear in his eyes. Pathetic, he muttered. Clara's hand twitched at her side, as if she wanted to reach for me but knew she couldn't. I turned toward the door, my pulse hammering, caught between fury and the desperate pull that still tethered me to her. And just before I stepped out into the hall, I heard her whisper, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. Don't give up on me. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after walking out of Clara's apartment. Her words, don't give up on me, kept replaying, threading through my thoughts no matter how hard I tried to shut them out. By the 3rd night, I couldn't take it anymore. My chest felt like it was splitting open, caught between anger and longing. Against every shred of sense I had left, I found myself standing at her door again. This time, she opened it slowly, as if she'd been waiting. Her eyes were rimmed red, her hair pulled back hastily. Behind her, the apartment was dim, the sound of the rain faint against the glass. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered. Then why didn't you tell me to stay away? I shot back. She closed her eyes, pain flickering across her face. Because I don't know how. The silence that followed was unbearable. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. I deserve the truth, Clara. No more half-answers. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. Yes, I'm still married. On paper, anyway. But Daniel and we've been finished for years. We live like strangers in the same cage. He doesn't leave, and Her voice cracked. I stopped fighting. I stared at her, my chest tightening. So what am I, then? A distraction? Someone to make you feel alive while you're still tied to him? Her eyes filled, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide. No. You're the first person in years who looks at me like I'm more than a mistake. You see me, and I don't know how to walk away from that. The confession knocked the air out of me. My anger faltered, replaced by something softer, more dangerous. I stepped closer. I can't keep being a secret. I don't want to be the shadow in someone else's story. She looked at me then, really looked. Her voice trembled. Then tell me what to do. Tell me to leave him. Tell me this is worth destroying what's left of my old life for. Her words hung heavy, impossible. She was handing me the knife and asking me to cut the cord for her. I swallowed hard, my pulse thundering. I can't make that choice for you. If you want me, it has to be your decision. For a long moment, she just stood there, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Then, slowly, she reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold, shaking, but she didn't let go. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I said. The storm outside crashed louder, filling the silence. She leaned in just slightly, enough that I could feel her breath against my skin. We didn't kiss. Not yet. Not tonight. But the weight of everything unsaid pressed between us, love, fear, and the fragile hope that maybe, somehow, this wouldn't be the end. The rain had stopped by morning. The streets outside Clara's apartment glistened under the weak glow of sunrise, like the storm had washed everything clean. Inside, though, the air still carried the weight of what we hadn't said. We sat on the couch, side by side, but not touching. The night before had left us raw, no shouting, no dramatic promises, just the quiet ache of 2 people standing on the edge of a choice neither of us knew how to make. She broke the silence first. He won't let go easily. Her voice was soft, steady, but I could hear the fatigue beneath it. I know, I said. My thumb traced the seam of my jeans, restless. But you're not happy with him. You haven't been for years. You said it yourself? Clara nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the pale light creeping across the floor. I stayed because it was easier than leaving. Easier than facing the mess. She paused, then turned to me. But you make me want something different. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were perfect, they weren't, but because they were real. Imperfect, hesitant, the kind of words someone only says when they're terrified of their own truth. I leaned back, closing my eyes. So where does that leave us? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for my hand. Her fingers laced through mine, slow and deliberate, as though testing if I'd pull away. I didn't. It leaves us here, she whispered. Scared. Uncertain. But together if you'll have me. I turned to her then, searching her face for hesitation, for regret. All I saw was vulnerability, the kind she'd fought to hide since the first night I knocked on her door. I squeezed her hand. That's all I wanted. Not perfection. Just honesty. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw her smile, not forced, not guarded, but small and real. It wasn't the kind of smile that promised a fairy tale ending. It was the kind that said this won't be easy, but it will be ours. We didn't talk about Daniel. Not then. Maybe not ever in detail. He would always be part of the story, but not the end of it. What mattered was that Clara had chosen to let me in, truly in, without walls, without secrets. As the light stretched across the room, she leaned her head against my shoulder. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was stealing something that wasn't mine. It felt like a beginning, uncertain, fragile, but real. And maybe that was enough. Ch8.